live. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 13th, and this is the Revenue Subcommittee of the Ways and Means Committee. We have 3 bills we are going to be discussing today, and let's begin with House Bill 754. This is Delegate Wells' bill on the vehicle excise tax and the trade-in allowance. There is an amendment that Mr. Ward sent around to folks earlier, so you should have a copy of the reprint. Mr. Ward, can you talk us, just guide folks through the amendment? I know everyone's been in meetings, so I don't know who's had a chance to really read through it and look at it.
Sure, Madam Chair. So the amendment, basically it allows for the trade-in allowance. The trade-in allowance would continue if you're trading in a vehicle to buy an electric vehicle. If you're trading in a vehicle to buy a hybrid vehicle, you would get 25% of the trade-in allowance. And if you're trading in a vehicle to buy a gas-powered vehicle, you would not get any trade-in allowance.
All right, any discussion?
So if I'm understanding this correctly, we're going to continue to allow people to take the deduction and thereby reduce their excise tax if they buy an electric or hybrid vehicle. We won't allow them to do it if they buy I'll just say traditional vehicle, right? And what does that do?
That's the amendment, yes.
What does that do to the fiscal number? Is there any idea of the analysis of that? Once we encourage everybody to buy electric vehicles, then we'll get nothing out of the bill.
We don't have an updated fiscal note.
But would my logic hold? Would everyone agree with me on my logic would hold if we encourage everybody and they buy electric cars? When that happens, if it happens 2 years from now or 10 years from now, we will then, at that point in time, get no fiscal value from the bill because it'll be the same as what it is now. You get the full deduction.
So Delegate Buckle, yes, I think in that theoretical scenario, that is correct. I think the intent here is to continue to provide an incentive because electric vehicles tend to be more expensive, and until until the market shifts, to have that additional incentive and make electric vehicles a little bit more accessible. Any other discussion? Questions? Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess maybe this question is for Stan, and my apologies that I have not yet read the amendments closely. So the provisions that you were just speaking to, and I think Delegate Buckle was just asking about, so is there a sunset date on those particular provisions?
No, not as the amendment is drafted.
Okay, I have further thoughts on that, but I will hold back to see if other folks have questions on this piece.
Well, Delegate Hartman.
Thank you. What's the effective date on this so I can order a car?
July 1st.
Thank you.
So going back to Delegate Polakovich-Carr's question about a sunset, I mean, I do personally think that makes sense. I think, the idea of keeping an incentive for EVs is not necessarily just to play favorites, but to be an incentive to help promote a new and growing market. I think a sunset is reasonable. Delegate Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to co-sign Delegate Buckle and Delegate Polakovich-Carr on the sunset. piece. Don't know where that should land, but I do think it would be prudent, even if we don't do it now, for us to reconsider it in the future. And then additionally, just adding on, of course, y'all know I got my e-bike and e-scooter situation that I love. And so I really think that we should also consider promoting those. Not saying we need to do that for that bill, but as we think about car dependency in the larger scale, that's part of, you know, what we've been trying to get to. So hoping that we could consider that sunset over time.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Palakvich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think maybe for the point of discussion, I'm gonna throw out there, not quite as an amendment yet, but a suggestion for a 5-year sunset on those provisions.
Okay, 5-year sunset. Okay. And Mr. Johansson, I see you have your hand raised. Typically guests are here only to answer questions if asked, but is there something very short, or do you have a clarifying question about the amendment?
Yeah, I haven't seen the amendment, but thank
Okay.
you.
Sure.
Certainly, I did send everybody a memo. Hopefully you got it. The
Yes.
repeal of the trade differences, our number one priority as dealers. It is more than just a tax credit that helps people afford a new car. It is about the cycle of sales transactions, and the fewer people that trade in cars to dealers because they get this benefit today, the fewer transactions we're going to have as a whole. And the fiscal note doesn't take into account any of that activity. So, you know, we would suggest that it's much more complicated than just getting rid of what some people think is a tax credit. It's much more complicated. And I think the issue with respect to if you have an ICE vehicle and you only get the trade difference if you buy an EV, as you know, many people aren't making that decision for the next several years. In my view, they're going to hold on to that ICE vehicle longer, which is typically a dirtier car, and won't even, because they won't get a benefit to trade it in on a new ICE vehicle if that's what they're trying to do. You're going to wind up kind of in this cycle where people are holding on to dirtier cars longer. So
Okay.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
where you're headed, Madam Chair, but I just wanted to put those comments on the record.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concern is, in addition to this, and the experts can tell me if I'm wrong. So with the internet, it's so easy to shop, you know, anywhere. If I buy a vehicle now in Pennsylvania, if this goes away, we're hurting our dealers. I know I'm still going to pay the tax when I come back, but I'm no longer as obligated. And I see Stan shaking his head. I'm no longer as obligated to work with a Maryland dealer, because when I trade in that vehicle, I'm getting 6% savings on the trade-in. And as I said before, that vehicle is taken, it's cleaned up, new tires are put on it, whatever, and it's sold at a markup. So we have a product that is now going back on the market at a higher value, and it's supporting our state dealers. Where now, West Virginia, we hear how close it is. Delaware, for me, how close it is. I'm open to a whole new variety of dealerships. And I really think we're going to be compounding the negative impacts by passing this legislation.
Thank you. Delegate Roberts.
I'm gonna hold my question for now because I just forgot what it was. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we have an amendment so we have an amendment that you received a reprint of. We have discussed revising that amendment to sunset the exclusions at 5 years. Looks like Delegate Roberts has remembered her question. Go ahead.
No, but I do want to just like Delegate Young co-sign on Julie and Delegate Buckles comment on the sunset date, but I will also admit that I did just purchase a EV in December, and I am receiving a $7,500 tax credit from the federal government, and I believe I'm also getting entitled to I haven't filed my taxes yet, but entitled to a state credit as well. I guess my question is, how does it, I guess my question is, if now that $7,500 tax credit from the IRS, I believe, has gone away. If we do a sunset date on the bill for just for the electronic vehicles now, is it going to bring everything back level in terms of how the state is going to benefit once the sunset goes down? I mean, once the sunset happens. You understand what I'm saying?
So once the sunset happens, then we'll see additional revenue because there will be less, because there won't be the trade-in credit anymore. Is that what you're asking? Okay. Okay.
But I guess I'm also asking, will there be a consideration of continuing the sunset? I mean,
there always is
the sunset when we get, when we
right. I mean, there's always that possibility, and I think that that's part of the value of a sunset, is not necessarily saying that it's only going to make policy sense for 5 years, but it's pushing us to reevaluate it in 5 years, right? And then there's the option of extending it or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So is there a motion on an amendment which looks a lot like the reprint, but with a sunset?
I would like to make that motion or second it, whichever.
Okay. So the amendment has been moved and seconded. Any additional discussion or questions on the amendment?
Madam Chair, can I just clarify, the amendment is to sunset the, basically to sunset the provisions for electric and hybrid vehicles after 5 years, is that correct?
Correct. To sunset the exclusion from the repeal or the continuation, whichever.
Excluded the continuation of the repeal of the exemption. Everyone understands that.
Did you have a more substantive comment you wanted to make, Delegate Buckle?
No, I
Okay.
certainly, if we're voting, I'll vote to put the sunset on. I won't vote for the amendments to create the differentiation between the trade-in values. But to put the sunset on that amendment is fine. If you do it all as one amendment, I get it. I just won't vote for that one. If you do it in two parts, I would say, sure, at 5 years, we should come back and do that analysis of what are we really getting from this.
Okay.
But I don't want to create the differentiation of classes of vehicles.
Just for efficiency of moving through this, unless you object,
okay.
I'm going to take them together.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So then it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay. All those opposed? Okay, the amendment passes. Now on the bill as amended. Delegate Roberts, I think your hand is just still up from previously, and I'm not sure. Okay, all right. Okay, and I see Delegate Vogel has just joined us. Delegate Vogel, welcome. Just so you know, we are on House Bill 754, and we have just voted to amend it, mostly consistent with the reprint that Stan circulated earlier. We did also include a sunset for the electric vehicle and hybrid continuation of some trade-in credit or value. So that amendment was just adopted, and now we are on the bill as amended.
Move favorable, Madam Chair.
So is there any discussion on the bill as amended? Any additional questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we will take the vote on the bill as amended. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and opposed. All right. House Bill 754 moves forward with a recommendation for favorable with amendment. Next up, House Bill 925. There are no amendments yet to this. So it is simply the bill as introduced, increasing the vehicle excise tax rate from 6% to 6.5%. Any questions or comments? Delegate Buckle.
Stan or Delegate Fenmark, I don't have this right in front of me. I apologize. What's the fiscal projected impact of this tax hike?
Sure. So about 90 million in fiscal 25, rising to 105 million in fiscal 29.
And so I guess I would say that the last bill that we passed, this bill that we passed, again, you add all these things together, they're significant tax hikes to consumers. They hurt particular small businesses, but in the aggregate, they're a drop in a bucket full of buckets with respect to the 2027-2028 blueprint forecast deficits, or the Transportation Trust Fund deficits, or any old deficits from any of these things. So I'm not really in favor of singling out one particular industry, an important industry, and one particular group of consumers and penalizing them when the truth is the bang won't be worth the buck, and you're not really going to be any different position 2 years from now than what we are today. But that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? And just to clarify, this is, both of these bills are revenues that would be going to the Transportation Trust Fund and to helping fill the needs there. Delegate Roberts.
Yes, so this excise tax is a one-time fee each time a car is purchased, right?
Correct.
Yes.
And the last one is a tax each time a car is traded. And that's it, just one time, that's it, right?
Yes, that's right.
Right. When you acquire a new car. Right.
Okay. Not factored into the loan, it's just one time.
Right. Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So maybe George or something can help me with this. So someone has 2 homes, and as we know, a lot of people with a second home in Florida declare that as their residency. When they come back and forth, can they, if they have a Florida tagged vehicle and they're here for the 5 months and 20 some days or whatever, can they keep a Florida tagged vehicle in Maryland that long legally? I mean, how does that work? My concern, once again, we're hurting the poorest of Marylanders, and the wealthier that have that second home or whatever that can register it elsewhere. Are we pushing more business out of Maryland potentially?
Yeah, I do believe that it's based on residency of the owner of the vehicle is where you have to title the vehicle. I don't know exactly how residency is defined for purposes of this law, but I do believe it's tied to residency.
So I know folks that have Florida residency and they keep a vehicle here, in the garage here, keep a vehicle down there. So if they're a Florida resident, they can keep a vehicle here in the garage with Florida tags. Is that what you're telling me?
I believe that that's right, but I would need to research it more to be able to give you a definitive answer.
Okay, because Florida would be cheaper than us, if we move forward with this. So, you know, just raising the concern as to the potential. Thank you.
In terms of folks who have legal residency in Florida, choosing to buy their cars in Florida.
Right, we're just pushing, you know, making people think twice as to where they're gonna buy their vehicle. You're buying an $80,000 vehicle, you know, it's, it all starts adding up, so, I don't know what they do as far as trade-in allowance. I think that's pretty popular in most states. I think it would be one of the few that doesn't. Stan, do you know how many states offers the trade-in allowance discount on the excise tax?
I do believe it's the large majority. I don't have the number in front of me.
Okay, so the large majority of states do that. Now we're gonna have no trade-in allowance credit and a higher tax. Feel bad for our Maryland dealers.
Delegate Buckle.
So that's all I guess I don't know if, you know that I'm not that great at Zoom, Madam Chair. I don't know if the folks, from the Dealers Association are on here. I think I heard Mr. Johansson before.
They are here if members have questions they want to.
Okay.
We have
That-
Mr. Kitzmiller, Mr. Johansson, and Mr.
Okay,
Johansson.
that's fine. I want to make sure I stay within our process. I'm still not used to, after 3 years of doing these on Zooms. I'm used to just being in the room and kind of talking. You know, if the Dealers Association, just briefly, I don't want to belabor it, but the combination of these two bills, in total, the removal of the trade-in deduction and the raising of the rate, did the Dealers Association, in all honesty, you know, I don't want to hear doom and gloom and just projections, but in all honesty, do you think this will result in Maryland-based dealerships closing essentially, or just hurting with respect to job loss?
Peter. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just real quick, do I think people are going to go out of business? I certainly don't want to overstate it, but I'm just looking at the average price of a new car in Maryland is $49,000 now, and the average price of a used car is $31,000. If you take away the trade difference, that's $1,700 up front. The customer, in addition, the customer has to come up with, and then you go to 6.5%, you're going to be well north of $2,500 additional money that a customer has to come up at the time they purchase the vehicle. And the problem is we use the trade-in credit, which is in 48 states right now, because we have it. I think Virginia and Hawaii are the only two that don't have it. We use the trade difference to put together deals for customers who have less than perfect credit. I mean, the average monthly payment since COVID for a new vehicle in the United States is $757. We're paying 8% interest on new car loans now. Less than 3 years ago, it was 2.5%. Vehicle affordability is at a breaking point before any of these things are added on top. I don't know about you all, but $757 a month to buy a vehicle is a lot of money. And now we're going to put another, you know, rounded off $85 or $100 onto the monthly payment. We're going to keep a lot of people out of the market, I guess, is the bottom line. They're just going to postpone purchasing a vehicle, you know, and tying it to an EV again. I guess I won't go down that path, but this is going to have a dramatic impact on people trying to buy vehicles. And again, I don't want to misstate, it's not new vehicles. It's all vehicles. So you go buy a used car, the price of, you know, the money you have to pay up front is going to increase substantially. Most deals are going to be well above $1,500 an additional money you have to come up with up front.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam. Excuse me, Madam Chair. So kind of along the lines of that, you know, my thought is when you're making a deal on a new vehicle, what's the typical amount down for those folks who are financing? So aren't some people actually financing some of the tax? Like they'll trade in, you know, if they're trading in their vehicle, they're actually rolling the tax into the deal and financing it. Isn't that correct?
That's true.
So now we're raising, you know, from the unaffordable $50,000 price, we're adding in, you said on average $1,700 loss from the trade-in allowance credit. And now we're jacking up the tax on the entire vehicle. You could be adding several $1,000s to a payment at, at 8% interest. So you're adding $20 a month to somebody's car payment on just tax alone, the interest on the tax alone, not including the interest. $3,000 at 8% is $240. That's $20 a month interest on tax, plus the tax. You're raising their payment. I don't want to speculate here, but you're raising their payment substantially. I would think it would have to be $50 that you're raising their payment with this bill per month.
Delegate Wells.
I think I got a little lost in the previous comment. Are we talking about both bills in totality? So the previous one I asked, I'm just meaning in terms of the dialogue I know which bill we're on.
So yes,
the dialogue, because it's
right.
kind of getting really convoluted because we're currently talking about the 0.5% tax increase. So I'm just trying to understand
But we're looking.
I'm just trying to, let me finish, Delegate Hartman. I'm just trying to understand if people could keep to the bill that we're talking about right now, because it's kind of confusing a little bit. In terms of like, are you saying, or can someone from, maybe was Peter mentioning that $1,700, are you specifically saying that's from a 0.5% increase to the excise tax? Or were you
No,
on
that's
that?
that's a trade difference.
Okay, got it. So in terms of the 0.5% tax increase, could you speak to that?
So if I look at my number, I went to law school because I'm not very good at math, but
That's my line. You can't use that.
The average,
You and Delegate Buckle.
the average price of a new car in Maryland is $49,000. At 6%, it's $2,940. And I think if it goes to 6.5, it goes to like $3,400. So it's like $300 more probably in that ballpark if you use the average new car price.
So increases the total purchase value to given the example that you gave of a $49,000 vehicle, which is,
right.
I wish I could afford a vehicle that expensive. But given that example, you're saying that for a nearly $50,000 vehicle, it would increase the total purchase value by $500. Is that what I heard you say?
Probably not. Yeah, about
Roughly,
that.
I'm not holding you to it as.
Oh, yes, that's
okay.
correct.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Could I ask a quick
Mr.
question?
Ward, sure.
I just wanted to ask, maybe Mr. Kitzmiller, what percentage of customers finance the tax versus pay it up front?
I would say probably, it kind of all goes in together. I would say probably 30% of the people probably end up financing the tax. Certainly people who lease vehicles, and we're at about 25% of leases in Maryland. People who lease vehicles tend to at least put everything into the monthly payment. So almost all those folks probably put the tax, title, license stuff in there. Somebody who's outright purchasing, I would think more people probably don't finance the tax than do.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Roberts. Nope. Okay. Okay, Mr. Fiasco, I think you were saying you wanted to try to answer the question that Delegate Buckle had asked earlier.
Yeah, I mean,
if you could just please keep it very brief.
I will, Madam Chair. Thank you. And Delegate Buckle asked what impact it would have. And I think my client, the Independent Auto Dealers Association, are used car shops. And one of the differences between my clients and the new dealers is we are less reliant on maintenance and shop services for profit centers. We do rely on the churn that Mr. Johansson spoke of recently. So if you reduce that churn, you kind of reduce our main profit center. And in regards to our proximity to other states that Delegate Hartman brought up, I think there is some concern that my clients have mentioned. They said, look, if you go to Pennsylvania and well, you know what? That's a comment on the previous bill, Madam Chair. I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments, discussion on this bill? Or is there a motion on the bill?
Motion to move favorable.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any additional comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And all those opposed. Okay. House Bill 925 is moving on with a favorable recommendation. Next up, I think all of our guests were here focused on the excise tax. You're welcome to hang out with us if you want. Moving on to House Bill 1007. This is the Fair Share for Maryland Act, and there is an amendment that Mr. Butler circulated earlier. It is a fairly short amendment, but fairly substantial in its impact. It's basically amending out much of the bill, limiting it to just the combined reporting provisions. Mr. Butler, is there anything else you want to add regarding the amendment?
No, Madam Chair, you explained it perfectly.
Okay, thank you. Any, just taking up the amendment to start, any questions, comments? Motions?
Motion to move favorable.
Okay. Is there a second on the amendment?
Second.
Thank you. All right, so the amendment has been moved and seconded. Delegate Buckle.
I just want to clarify. So this is the amendment to strike the entirety of the Fair Share Act bill, except for the provision on corporate reporting, combined corporate reporting, and the combined corporate reporting would still be worldwide or global for that corporation and all of their international subsidiaries or affiliates, not limited to the water's edge. Is that correct?
Correct. It does not change the provisions of the bill related to combined reporting. It simply takes out the rest of the bill.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Okay.
Oh, I do have a question. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Is there an analysis, George, of what the fiscal impact would be of just this one provision? I remember this bill. There was some dispute within the fiscal note from the advocates of how, they characterized it as $1.6 billion net raise. Now we're amending and taking out the EITC expansion portion and every other portion except the combined corporate reporting. Does that have a separate and individual rank as a revenue generator?
Yes, on page 9 of the fiscal note, it reflected all the individual tax changes. The combined reporting is estimated to generate $65.3 million in fiscal year 2028, and then $224.6 million in fiscal year 2029.
Is there an explanation? Is that because of the onset when the program comes in, the discretion?
That's correct.
So because it's only for a half a year because of the
Correct.
fiscal year. So you can roughly say about $220 some million a year would be the going forward estimate. And we wouldn't begin to receive those monies until what year? 2028?
2028 is the delayed effective date for these provisions.
All right, thank you.
And Mr. Butler, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, that is partially not just a decision to wait, but sort of time to for the comptroller's office to be ready to implement this. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's what I was told too, Madam Chair, is that the comptroller's office is there in the middle of some massive IT transition over that they would have a very hard time bringing in. They can change rates was what I was told. If you wanted to change a rate like we just did, they could accommodate that pretty quickly. But if you want to create an entirely new rubric within their reporting system, they didn't think they could do that for a couple of years.
Right. So I think that this timing, I think, takes that into account. Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add, yes, specifically, we did check in with the comptroller's office as we were drafting the bill, and the timeframe in the bill reflects what they thought was realistic for when they could actually implement it.
I believe we are still on the amendment. So let me see if there's no additional discussion on the amendment. Can we take a vote on the amendment? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And
I'm in
any
favor of the amendment.
opposed?
You eliminated 80% of the bill. I'm in favor of the amendment.
Okay. All right, so we had unanimous support for the amendment. Now, any discussion on the bill as amended?
Move favorable.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any additional questions or discussion? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed. All right. House Bill 1007 is moving forward with a recommendation of favorable with amendment. Thank you all for your time. And we will be meeting again as a subcommittee either tomorrow or Friday, possibly both. So stay tuned.